In this video, you and I are going to use 5 of my favorite AI-based tools inside of Photoshop to retouch this image using primarily AI. Then we're going to compare it to an actual professional retouch just to see how big is the difference. My name is Pi, and I'm one of the founders of Lynn and Jersa Photography and SLRLounge.com. We're teaming up with Adorama to bring you a new series of photography tutorials called Master Your Craft right here on Adorama TV. So let's dive in. What's up, friends? My name is Pi. Welcome to Adorama TV. Welcome to my home studio. Let's get right into this. This would be a great time to pause the video, download the exercise file. I'm going to give you a bit of an intro. You might not even need to pause. This is the raw file that we're going to be working on, so feel free to load it into Lightroom Classic or directly into Photoshop using ACR. And as I'm giving you a bit of an intro, you can just apply a basic color to it. So I've used Visual Flow's Pure Pack for this image, kind of to give it just an editorial finish. So this would be the original file. This is where I'm taking it, and I'm just kind of correcting that horizon line on the backdrop. So while you're getting your settings dialed in, and you can use anything you'd like, your own look, your own presets, Visual Flow, doesn't matter. Just get a look dialed in as I give you a bit of an intro. I'm a huge fan of, well, efficiency, meaning I want to get to 90% of the result, the place where my clients, they can't distinguish the difference between, going in by detail and doing hand touch, just spending hours on something versus maybe something that's 90%, but took only a matter of minutes. So if I can get to 80 or 90% in a fraction of the time, that's a big deal to me because I can get to a result that clients love with spending a lot less time in front of the computer. And I think that's big for all of us, right? So the goal here is to see how far these AI-based tools have come, and they've come quite a ways. And not only am I going to show you my favorite 5 inside of Photoshop, the ones that I'm using the most, some of them are actually built into Photoshop. They come automatically. I'm also going to show you a couple plugins as well from Retouch for Me, which are pretty cool. And we're going to compare it and see. I have one image that was professionally retouched, and we're going to compare it to the final AI-based retouch using just our mouse and some AI-based tools. With that, hopefully you have your settings dialed in. We're going to get straight into it now. So I'm going to press Control-E or Command-E to get this image into Photoshop. If you're inside of ACR, just press OK. Now I'm inside of Photoshop. The first thing that I'm going to do is, because I want to be able to compare back and forth to our original, I'm going to press Control-J or Command-J just to jump everything to a new layer. And I'm actually going to start with tool number 1, is a plugin tool, and I'm going to talk about it in just a second, but we're going to call it Clean Backdrop, okay? And here's the thing, in the past, probably the most efficient way of cleaning the backdrop is to do a sort of blur. So what we would typically do is apply like a blur, maybe a Gaussian, I don't know if I said that right, but if not, please forgive me. And then essentially what we do is mask out the subject and apply it to the background. This is kind of a messy way of doing it. There's several ways you can do it. You could do it via frequency separation, all that kind of stuff. But each of these is fairly time consuming, although it's better than doing it by hand in terms of like cloning and healing. The first tool that I want to show you is actually from Retouch for Me. I think the website's called retouch4.me. And they have a series of these AI-based plugins that work with Photoshop or they're standalone. And I'm going to do Clean Backdrop. So take a look at this. I'm going to click Apply. And with that Clean Backdrop, look at the before versus the after. It's not perfect. There are a couple like little areas that I want to fix, but holy crap, it does such a good job. And so I wouldn't say like if you're only processing one image here or there, then it doesn't really make sense to, like if you're only cleaning backdrops every now and then, this doesn't really make sense to get a plugin that might be $150 to do that. But if you're doing this quite often, then that in and of itself can be a lifesaver. Now let's see where it kind of messed up. What I'm going to do is add a mask to this layer, and we're going to paint black to conceal. And for example, it kind of did this weird detection thing over his arm, right? So I'm just going to paint that off. It also looks like some of the pants, maybe it kind of detected like something going on with the pants. So I will remove that as well. And I think that's mostly it. Let's see if there's any other areas that it didn't quite. It did something weird with this little strand of that yarn. So I'm just going to shrink this down and click there. You will notice that there are some small artifacts, like these little white spots. They got kind of overcorrected. So what I'm going to do is press Alt-Control-Shift-E or Option-Command-Shift-E, and we're going to do a new layer, and we're going to call this Corrections. So that way we can kind of see what is the amount of actual by hand corrections we have to make to that tool. And what I'm going to do, the other cool thing about this too, by the way, which I forgot to mention, is that plugin actually retained the grain. See, that preset that I used, the Visual Flow Pure preset, actually applies a very subtle amount of grain to kind of soften and give images a bit of a more like organic vibe to it. Oftentimes our tools inside of Photoshop will actually kill that grain. They'll remove it. This one didn't, so that's kind of cool. So what I'm going to do is just using the healing tool with my mouse. You can press J to grab that. I'm just going to go over these areas that might be a little bit overcorrected and just heal those out real quick. They're pretty easy to spot. And so far, if I'm talking like volume of images, this is still substantially easier than trying to do like a Gaussian blur and masking, or trying to do frequency separation or anything else over a large number of images. And by the way, if you guys have any better solutions for any of the things that I'm doing right now, I'm all for it. So comment below. This is like, the more we can combine with our combined knowledge, we can get to a better place. What I'm doing now is pressing Shift J, and I'm switching to the patch tool. This is another smart tool that I use inside of Photoshop a lot, where I can make a simple selection and just kind of fix patterns by kind of selecting and then sampling from a nearby area. And it does a really nice job of fixing those. And for the most part now, our background is sufficiently clean. For the most part, it looks freaking fantastic. And let's just take a look at what it did, because I want you guys to see this. So there's the before. Here's the after. Notice that it even kind of smoothed the transition in paint and stuff. That's pretty crazy. Okay, tool number 2. Well, really this is number 3, because I already showed you the patch tool, which is another smart tool that we'll be using a bit too. So either way, forget the number. Let's do content aware fill. So you'll notice that and this, by the way, is built directly into Photoshop. So you have this automatically. Oftentimes when we shoot in the studio or even out on location, we have to shoot in a way where we're getting some of the unwanted background. This is a V flat on the right side. This is like the ceiling of the image. So what I'm going to do is press L, and let's go ahead and jump this to a new layer again. I'm going to press Alt-Control-Shift-E just to create an entirely new merged layer. And we're going to call this content. We'll call this, I mean, it's content fill, but we'll call it like border fixing or background fixing, whatever you want to call it, doesn't matter. I'm going to press L to make a selection, and just using my mouse. So again, the goal here is that I'm not using any actual retouching tools like a Wacom or anything like that. I'm just going to use my mouse and make a selection of all this stuff that I want out. Now with that selected, I'm going to press Shift Backspace. We're going to bring up the Content Aware Fill. Just make sure that under Contents it says Content Aware, and then turn on Color Adaptation. That color adaptation, press OK when you're ready, by the way. It's a fantastic feature to turn on when you want Photoshop to focus on transitioning color as opposed to just patterns. So if it's mostly patterns and objects, turn it off. If we're talking about like a seamless background where you want the colors to blend in, then turn it on. But look at that. One single selection and click, and that is absolutely wild. Now this is where I'm going to go back to that second tool. I can go back to the patch tool by pressing Shift J. If there's any areas that I want to like smooth in the transition, I can select those areas and then just drag it to another area where I want to sample from, and just kind of correct any transitional areas like this to get to a little bit of a better spot. While I have the patch tool selected, and while we're still on this tool number 2, what I'm going to do is just grab some of those areas of background that I would say are noticeable. One of the big things that we talk about in terms of like, if you were to go through professional retouching courses like my buddy Pratik's course, and you were to do this by hand, one of the big things that he would say is like, make sure that you're not over retouching, right? Over retouching is when you're zooming in like what I'm doing right now and fixing things that are never going to be seen, because maybe when you print the image, it's only going to be like an 8x10, or maybe it's going to be a 20x30. So what we typically would do is make the image the same size that it would be in real life and then retouch from there. The next thing that I want to do is I'm going to go to the next tool, and I think I might have said 5 in the intro. But we're going to lump them up. There might be actually 6. Okay, so what we're going to do now is go to neural filters. So I believe this is number 4. We're going to do a retouch on the face. Let's jump this to a new layer and let's do face neural filter. Okay, and let's go up to the filters and we're going to go to neural. Now we're starting to get all these new Photoshop developed, features that are just ridiculously cool. They're all AI-based filters. We're going to use skin smoothing. What I like to do with this is turn it on. The only thing here that you have to understand is that it doesn't work if the faces are profiles. So I'm hoping that in future versions, Adobe's going to kind of correct that. But right now, it does need to be front-facing on the image. I'm going to turn the blur up and the smoothness up to 50. This isn't something that, this is just one technique that you can use for this. What it's going to do is output all of this to a new layer, and I'm going to press OK. So on this new layer, if I zoom in, you'll notice it actually does a pretty good job of that retouch. It's a little bit too smooth. So if I compare the before to the after, that's kind of wild, right? I mean, it really took care of almost everything on the skin. Now, if, for example, and my subject here is a dancer, he has a bit of acne scarring. So depending on how natural I want it to feel, I can dial down the opacity. So what I often do is I'll turn that feature all the way up, and then I'll simply control opacity on how much I want that smoothing effect to come through. For this image, I'm going to go up to say 80%. Usually I'll land between 40 to 80%-ish on how much I want it to come through. And then I get a nice balance where it looks natural. I can still see the natural texture of the skin, but it also looks a lot softer and kind of cleaned up. And it's a nice job of cleaning up too. We actually retain pores with this feature as opposed to other plugins and features that just smooth skin and make it look plasticky. So it's come a long way. I'm going to save this out as our neural filter layer, just so we have that. Hello! I have a visitor. It's early morning. Do you want to say hi? Do you want to say hi? Do you want to say hi? I'm going to find someone for her, and I'll be back with you in a second. So I'm going to press Alt-Control-Shift-E or Option-Command-Shift-E on a Mac, and we're just going to call this, we'll call this the crop content fill. What I'm going to do now is use this cropping tool, and we're going to pull out. If you hold down Alt or Option and Shift, it'll constrain proportions of the image, which is what I want, because I don't want it to change the actual dimensions. When I was shooting this, there's objects to the left and right of my subject. So oftentimes we can't quite get as wide as we might want on the composition. I'm going to shrink this down a bit, get it centered up, make sure content aware is on, press the check mark. You'll notice that because everything transitions naturally in the image, Photoshop can do a really nice job of detecting it and then just increasing. Look at that. I mean, it did a beautiful job of transitioning the entire edge and increasing the size of my canvas, giving me more crop space for the final image. So that's fantastic. We've done the neural filter. We've done the crop content. That's another Photoshop based. Let's go back to another Retouch for Me plugin. And this time I'm going to jump this to a new layer. This time what we're going to use is a plugin called Portrait Volumes. It's kind of cool. This plugin will actually do a bunch of things simultaneously. So under filters, I'm going to go to Retouch for Me, and I'm going to go right here to Portrait Volumes. This thing is going to do several things. It's going to dodge, burn, it's going to lift, it's going to heal, it's going to smooth, it's going to, I guess that's why they call it Portrait Volumes, because it does all of it. When it's done, I like turning up the blend all the way up and then again using opacity to kind of adjust it down on a layer basis. But look at the before versus the after on just this effect. So this is kind of fun. What in the world is going on? It did a full dodge and burn. I mean, it even dodged locally in the pants and it's not fully perfect. There are areas that I would fix, but it did a pretty dang good job. And what I would do with this is just kind of back it off a little bit now. Maybe to 50, 60%-ish. Okay. And then I would probably also add a mask to this. And there were some areas where I noticed it kind of missed the, right up by his head, it kind of got a little bit of the background. So what I would do is just paint that one off. So just with a black brush, press B, X to get your black brush, you can fix that up, okay? And I think there's a little bit down here too. Yeah, Other than that though, that's crazy. This stuff is fun because we not only see where we're at right now, but kind of where all of this technology is going. Now, last thing that I want to do, I'm going to merge everything to one more layer. We're going to do skin tones, and we're going to use one last Retouch for Me plugin. And again, what I would say here is like, look at what these things are doing. I do believe that they actually allow you to download. They actually allow you to download the demos. You can test them out. So test them on your images and see if it's doing a lot of the work that you would normally be doing, then the price is kind of fully justified because it saves you that much time. But if not, then just stick with what you have inside of Photoshop. I just want to show you guys what's possible. And one other thing to note is that I am putting this through, these are 45 megapixel RAW files off of a Canon R5, and I have them at full resolution. So when you download the exercise file, they're going to be quite a bit smaller. So notice that it does take my computer a little bit of time to churn through this. Now this last little skin tone, notice what it does is it makes a slight and subtle adjustment to not only unify skin tones, but it actually adjusted the overall image a little bit. It pulled the yellows out of the areas of the image that there shouldn't be yellow, and it kind of made it gray. It also actually made skin tone like on the arm more matching of like the shoulder and of the face. So kind of tighten those things up. And I'm not sure if that's coming through on the video because this is a very subtle adjustment, but still pretty crazy cool. Now here's the thing, I'm not going to do anything by hand here, meaning I'm going to leave this guy in. That's the clip that my retoucher would have pulled out. So I'm going to leave everything else in because I just want to use primarily those AI-based tools and not really anything else. Let's save this. And with this done now, I don't know how many different tools we covered, but it was a good amount. And hopefully you guys got a lot of little tips along the way. I want to now compare this, and we're going to look at the professional retouch and let's see like where are the gaps, like where are the things that we want improved. Okay, I'm back inside of Lightroom. This is the full professional retouch by hand. This was our AI-based retouch. Let's select both those images. I'm gonna press Shift F just to go full screen, and let's take a look. So first, what I would say is I kind of do like the skin color that was done. On the left side is our AI-based, and you can see the difference because this one didn't, my retoucher didn't extend the composition, so we know automatically that this is the one that we just worked on, right? I do like the skin tone over here. I like that it cleaned up the yellows from the background of the image. Automatically, I'm like, yeah, I like that. But also I can notice that on the right side, the actual retouching and smoothing over here by hand is still better. It's not crazy. Like when you look at this, you're like, yeah, that is, if I'm going to zoom in on this, if I'm going to blow this up to a full commercial like size billboard or whatever it might be. I mean, you're not looking at billboards that close, but if you're going to blow this up and you're going to look closely, then completely, it makes sense that you would do a full retouch. But at this distance, like at a normal viewing distance, you would not be able to tell the difference between the skin on both these. It's actually pretty fantastic. There are some areas where like, I do like how my retoucher kind of fixed the darker area on the forehead, the darker spot on the cheek right here. That's nice. I would have retouched this guy out, that little dangly hair thing that's sticking out the side, but my retoucher missed that piece. She did get this one though. Look at the clip right there. So obviously a retoucher is going to be able to see things and make adjustments needed that the AI tools probably are not going to. The AI tool would look at that and just go, oh, that's part of the body, part of the wardrobe. My retoucher also took out this strand right here. That looks really cool. Okay. And it looks like she did some work down here too. So you can see how they tightened up the strands, removed some of the ones that were a little bit distracting on that side. Let's take a look at the floor though, because my retoucher did the floor. Oh my goodness. I would say that I do prefer the AI-based retouch for the entire floor. Look at how clean that is. It even did a probably a little bit of a better job in the shadow areas too. That to me is wild. Okay, now let's look at the other areas. So you can clearly see that my professional retoucher did a better job over skin over here. Like they were able to clean up any of these scarring or these issues. The skin texture is more uniform. You can see that the color is also more uniform. Like we're not getting those strange little pink spots because the dodging and burning. Most likely a professional retoucher is going to use like dodging and burning, very localized, like very detailed work to get all this to be uniform. And I'll even say that like when it comes to matching skin tone, the Retoucher killed it. Like, I like that this image has the yellows pulled out of the grays, but over here, there is not really a comparison between my full Retoucher versus the AI. Like, look at how uniform the skin is as it goes up to the face. That being said though, where we're currently at in terms of AI, with these AI-based tools, I could deliver this. And if we're not talking like commercial clients, like if we're talking, this is going to be put up, in some commercial, clothing manufacturer, I want to go with the one on the right for sure. I'd want to get a professional retoucher to get in there and do all the work. If this is going to like my portrait clients, they are not going to be able to tell the difference between these two images. And I think that's absolutely incredible that our AI-based tools, which by the way, you can design presets for to automatically run those, our AI-based tools are handling most of the job. And those tools are just going to get better with time. So this is what we have now. Who knows what we're going to have a year from now? So I hope this video was helpful, hopefully gave you not only some tips and insights on what you can do inside of Photoshop, but also gave you an idea of what other plugins can do, and maybe really sped up your workflow as well. If any of these things are things that you do frequently, I think there's some good stuff in there. If you guys enjoyed, what will help me out? Well, you guys can tell Adorama and YouTube that I'm doing a great job by commenting on the video, liking it, and subscribing to the channel. I also love your guys' comments because it gives me a lot of ideas in terms of future videos. This is my cue to end because I don't know what the heck they're doing in my backyard, but whatever that is just started up and giant machines are now going in the background. I'll see you guys next week. If you guys want to follow me at PyJersa, you can do so on Instagram. And until then, peace.